The body would not stay down. That is where the story begins. Not with the birth, not with the battles, not even with the death. With the refusal. The cold slab, the sealed tomb. The years of silence below the stone. And then, Lowell's seal breaking open, and something that should have been gone a long time climbing back out. Wearing the shape of a man who swore an oath to his ancestors and never once broke a promise while he was alive. His name was Sion. He swore he would die as a proud warrior. He kept that promise. The problem is what happened after. New here? Subscribe. Every week, a League of Legends story told the way it deserves to be. Heard. The Noxus that made Sion was not the Noxus of diplomacy and empire building. It was the Chappa, Noxus of bone and iron, of a people who measured worth in blood, spilled and ground held, of a culture so old it remembered what it was like before the walls, before the generals, before the Chappa. Name. When survival was the only law, and the strong simply took what the weak could not. Protect. Sion was the last living remnant of that world. His people had been absorbed into Noxus the way a river absorbs a smaller stream. Completely, without apology, without much ceremony. What remained of them was Sion himself. A man of such extreme violence that his own allies feared him nearly as much as his enemies did. He was not subtle. He was not strategic. He did not write letters or negotiate terms or think 3 moves ahead. He moved forward. He did not stop. He had sworn an oath to his ancestors when he was still young enough that the words felt enormous in his mouth. He would never retreat. He would die with ground under his feet, not at Prua, his back. He would fall as a warrior, not a fugitive. In a culture that produced more oaths than it could keep. Sion's held. Every battle. Every campaign. Every morning he woke up in a world that Marachels kept trying to kill him and failing. The empire grew on the strength of men like him. And for a long time, everything was moving in. Hachel Yi, one direction. Then came Demacia. No one had expected Demacia to push back the way it did. Nations resisted Noxus. That was ordinary. Nations bled and eventually broke and eventually won Gaeaf. Noxian, then King one Gaeaf, joined the long list of territories the empire administered with an iron efficiency. This was the dot pattern. The pattern had held for generations. The Noxian High Command planned around it the Freesha. Way engineers plan around gravity, not as something to overcome, but as a condition of the world. Demacia was not interested in the pattern. They drove Noxus east, pushed the legions back until they were huddled behind the walls of Hvardis, a city that had once been a Noxian stronghold and now felt very much like a corner. The Radar commander inside those walls had taken several losses already. He was comfortable behind Rekastone. He watched the Demacian forces preparing to withdraw, their work done, their point made. And he did not open the gates, did not fire a single arrow. Let them walk away. Sion arrived from the north and saw the retreating army on the horizon. He saw the commander on the wall. He threw the commander off the wall. Then he ordered the attack. Here is the thing about Sion that the histories get wrong. He was not mindless. He understood exactly what he was doing. He understood the risk. He understood the math. He attacked anyway, because retreat was not a word that existed in the vocabulary he had built his entire life inside. He cut through the Demacian ranks the way something elemental cuts through things. Not with plan or precision, but with the total commitment of a force that has decided direction as goal. More important than survival. His own men followed. Some of them. The ones from Hvardis, the fell-feed tries, ones who had already bent twice, folded a third time and retreated behind the walls the momentum shifted, leaving Sion and his small core of loyal warriors encircled. They fell one by one. He kept moving. The swords found him. The arrows found him. The weight of sheer numbers found him and pressed him toward the ground, and still he did not stop, did not turn, did not take one step backward. He was looking for one thing in all that chaos. Jarvan, the king, the man whose Kana presence at the front had made this Demachian advance possible, the symbol around which Tortu, everything else, organized itself. He found him. What followed was not a duel in any traditional sense. Sion was already dying when he reached Kamarkanaleos, the king. The wounds were too many. The blood loss was too great. His body was operating on Nevrokti, something beyond physiology. The last reserves of a will so extreme it had outlasted the Ben-Never. Biological case it lived inside. He dropped the axe, both hands free. One went to the crown, one went to the throat. Jarvan's guards hit him again and again and again. The hand did not open. Sion felt the king go still beneath his grip. Only then, only when he was certain did he allow the darkness in. The Noxian forces carried the body home. In one fist, the crown of a Demachian king. They buried him with it. They built a tomb worthy of what he had been, and they sealed it, and they mourned. And they told the story the way you tell a story about something finished. It was not finished. 50 years passed. Noxus contracted. The confidence of the expansion years gave way to something more uncertain. Internal pressures, shifting alliances, territories that required more management than they produced. The supreme general of that era, Boram Darkwill, was a man who understood power, the way some men understand debt, acutely, personally, with a constant low-level anxiety about how much was left. He needed something. A faction called the Black Rose, old, quiet, operating in the spaces between official Noxian power, offered him what he needed. They had been studying the tomb. They had been called a Blackshin, studying the magic sealed inside it, or more precisely the magic that could be forced inside it. Forbidden resurrection, the kind of thing that turns the dead into something that wears the dead's shape, without quite being the dead anymore. Darkwill accepted. The tomb opened. The seal broke. The thing that had been Sion climbed out. He felt no pain. This is important. The man who had died feeling everything, who had kept his grip through wounds that should have dropped him 10 times over, now felt nothing. Not the cold air, not the stone under his feet, not the weight of the chains they quickly understood they Weishel would need. Just hunger, not for food, for something the living body translates into rage and the crame. Dead body has no word for it all. Only motion, only forward, only the direction of blood. He was pointed at Noxus's enemies. He solved them. This is the part of the story no one celebrating his return thought through. You cannot give a weapon, a conscience, and then remove the conscience and keep the precision. What remains is Pesi Teshav, not a weapon. It is a catastrophe with a direction. He did not distinguish. That was the problem Darkwill had not fully modeled. The thing wearing Sion could not be Huska, argued with Huska, could not be redirected mid-charge, could not be made to understand that the problem Doris. Screaming shape in front of it was wearing Noxian colors. Allies died. Soldiers who had marched to battle alongside the living. Sion's legend, now fled from the dead. Sion's reality. Desertion. Spread through the ranks of any force that fought near him. The victories were real. The cost was untenable. Darkwill ordered him back underground. Hundreds of warriors were required to bring him down. Not because he could be killed, but because the body had to be slowed enough to chain. Each link placed at enormous cost. He was dragged back to the immortal bastion and sealed beneath his own statue. The monument built to Uz. Honor him becoming the lid of a prison. The roaring stopped. Not because he calmed. Because there was nothing left to tear at. He remained there, neither fully dead nor fully alive, while the world above continued without him. Darkwill was eventually removed from power by a general named Swain who understood something Darkwill never quite grasped, that power is not about the size of your instruments. It is about the precision with which you use them. Swain had a use for Sion, a precise one. The cage came off in the direction of Hvardis. The city had broken from Noxian administration during the chaos of the transition. A reasonable decision from where they stood, and a fatal miscalculation about what the new Noxus Coxia was willing to demonstrate. Swain did not send an army. He sent one thing, in a cage, on a cart, with the cage door arranged to open at a specific moment. What happened to Hvardis was not a battle. The towers came down bare-handed. The walls that had once sheltered a Noxian commander too, afraid to open the gates, the same walls, the same stone, different century, collapsed under. The weight of something that had waited a very long time for something to tear apart. Sion laughed. This is in the records. The sound of it was described by survivors in terms that language, ha-ha-ha-ba, built to contain. The other territories that had separated from Noxus looked at what remained of Hvardis. They buckchen from came back. He is still in use. That is not quite the right word, but it is the word that fits. When the doors of the back tomb open and the light comes in, raw, cold, indifferent morning light, something happens. That might be relief. The hunger can be fed. The noise that is always present in whatever passes. For his mind goes briefly, partially quiet. He remembers fragments. The oath, the axe, the feeling of cold stone and warm blood. The bria bia, specific weight of a crown in a clenched fist. Not enough to reconstruct the man. Enough to know bridar mahaibia, that the man existed. Enough to know that something was lost in the conversion between what Juliganacha he was and what he became. The world still shakes when he moves through it. That part, at least, is exactly as he promised. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. Every week, the full lore of a League of Legends champion, told the way it was meant to be heard.